Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
I'm painfully aware of the conversations that are happening, particularly on our college campuses right now, around the situation in Gaza and Israel. And there's just so much anguish involved there on both sides. People speaking out from their heart about what they perceive as genocide. But often that speech, and out of that passion, that speech bleeds over into blatant anti-Semitism and calls for the destruction of Israel. And on the other side, Israelis and Jewish people see this, what they consider an unprovoked attack, and a very existential threat to their home. And so there's all this anguish on both sides. And I've seen this reduced in the media to, oh, it's a matter of free speech versus hate speech. And I wonder is it really that simple? Should we be speaking out as Buddhist practitioners? And can we speak out about injustice in a way that isn't harmful to other people? And what form should the speech take? John Peacock, in the latest edition of Tricycle, says, if our quest for personal flourishing in this world through the study and practice of Buddhism does not lead us to question the structures that give rise to hunger, inequality, prejudice, and injustice, then our Buddhism exists in a rarefied atmosphere divorced from the struggle for existence of billions of beings on this planet. So I guess the question for me is, what ethical responsibility do we have to speak up when we see something that is really disturbing? I've also seen in a related area, and kind of coincidentally, recently I heard a Dharma talk from someone who he was relating going to a retreat at a Buddhist center. And at the beginning of the retreat, they gave a list of kind of do's and don'ts around how to communicate during that weekend. And these were around, avoiding, basically it was about making everyone feel comfortable and not alienating other people. And, obviously avoiding misogyny and racism and homophobia. And there was a whole list of things. And he took issue with that. He felt that Buddhism is not about telling you what you can and can't say. And he felt that his right to free speech was being impinged upon in that talk. And so I wondered, can that be simplified down to just a matter of free speech versus right speech? Also at home, I know how difficult it can be to have conversations in our primary relationships. It often seems like we're talking past each other. And this could be a source of conflicts, even in loving relationships. And so what I'm wondering is, does the Dharma give us guidance in our private conversations, as well as in our political conversations, as well as in our public conversations, our conversations within the Sangha? In the Dharma, we hear about right speech, and we often hear about right listening. And today what I want to look at is that dynamic between those two. And I'm going to call it, I like wise speech and wise listening rather than right or wrong. And what I want to look at is this idea of a wise conversation, looking at that dynamic between us, and how can I find my voice in a way that doesn't diminish yours, and how do I find and express myself in a way that cherishes your views, even if it's different than mine, and how do we find an open-hearted, authentic voice in those situations? What guidance does the Dharma give us? And does the Dharma support us as we lean into this wholehearted engagement with each other? Read something very briefly here from The Mind of Clover. This is from Robert Aiken. He says, this is from The Way and Its Virtue. He said, the purpose of Zen practice is the perfection of character. And that's a quote from Yamada Roshi. Many people shy away from the idea of perfection. They know that nobody is perfect, so they neglect their own character and don't try to correct themselves. Other people tend to be perfectionistic and are reinforced in their neuroses by moral teaching. And there is the question posed by the young Dogen. If all beings are Buddha, then why all this striving? Perfection seems to open a can of worms. Yet it is a term that can open the true way. The one who knows that nobody is perfect can also afford to be aware of personal failings without being discouraged by them. The one who is moderately perfectionistic has a well-developed conscience and is prepared to do zazen. The one who knows that all beings by nature are Buddha is not always looking to the future, but seeks true nature in the moment. I'm sure that idea referred to as progress, not perfection, in our striving. So the Dharma tells us a lot about speech, wholesome, wise, virtuous speech. And when I talk about this, I'm talking about all the ways that we communicate, whether it's in writing, whether it's online, verbal, nonverbal communication. It's part of this eightfold path of liberation. And it's one of the precepts. And of the 10 grave precepts, 4, maybe 5 of them relate to speech. There's false speech, slander, not praising self at the expense of others, not disparaging the 3 treasures. And I would also include refraining from intoxicants, because there's something really delicious and intoxicating about slander and gossip and getting angry and really getting in there and getting juicy with it. And that can be very intoxicating. And the thing about these precepts that, this is my take on it, is that the precepts are there to guide my behavior. They're not there for me to judge your behavior. And if I'm judgmental of your communication, that's a barrier between us communicating. So I try to avoid that. So this wise speech, it's a mindfulness practice. And it's commitment to being aware of my body, my mind, my emotions. It's helpful in learning restraint. And I think most importantly, I need the mindfulness to see how my speech is landing on you, and I need to be able to moderate accordingly. And if I get too married to my truth, to my rightness, and I use that, as my flag leading me into battle, I'm trampling other people, and I'm not even aware of it, and not good. There's a Tibetan prayer that says, may you have happiness and the causes of happiness. May you be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. And very often that suffering is coming out of my mouth. Wise speech means attending to the law of karma, cause and effect. I need to see what my speech is doing. also assumes imperfection. You know, I have had to experience slander and gossip and lying and character assassination, all these things personally, and seeing how they cause suffering in me and other people. And that's how I learn, you know. And if I can see that and appreciate that in myself, non-judgmentally, this has been my path towards more wholesome speech, then I can see that other people's struggle with this speech is their path as well. And just like I can give myself compassion, I can extend compassion to other people as well. You know, wise listening is also important. It means paying attention to more than just the sound and more than just your ears. Thich Nhat Hanh calls it deep listening or generous listening. Joan Halifax calls it listening from the heart. And the Quakers call it devout listening. I have to want to know what you're really saying and where it's coming from. Christine Longacre says, you must listen with your whole being, not just your ears. Listen with your body, your heart, your eyes, your energy, your total presence. Listen in silence without interrupting. Fill any spaces of silence between you with love. The moments when I can listen like this to my children or anyone else are rare. Yet these words inspire me with a sense of possibility, and for this I am grateful. Wise conversation also means that I'm honoring the relationship between us and seeing this as a third entity. There's me, there's you, there's us. And I'm honoring us when I'm engaging in deep listening and wise conversation. I'm looking at the effect that my speech has on you. And a good rule of thumb for me is when in doubt, shut up. You know, just shut up. But at the same time, be courageous. You know, wise speech is often about not speaking. That's not always the case. Sometimes it is courageous speech. You know, in my family of origin, it wasn't safe to talk openly about my thoughts and my feelings and the same thing at school as a gay kid. You know, I was sidelined and I was silenced, and I learned that the safest thing for me was to shut up and hide, basically, and that's how I got through school. It's taken me a long time as an adult to find my voice. You know, what I learned to do was to people please, to say what I thought you wanted to hear. So practicing wise speech means finding a wise way to communicate my needs and my boundaries that I'm used to keeping hidden. You know, I was always afraid of rocking the boat, that if I spoke out and really let you know what was going on inside me, you would leave. That's the fear. That's the fear. And what I've learned is, if that's true, you know, it's probably not a loss. And also, this wise speech, you know, it's not wise speech if I'm not being kind to myself. And at times that means standing up and having those difficult conversations. I've had many years in therapy to practice those conversations, and it's been really helpful. So we get back to you know, that first situation I talked about with on the college campuses and free speech. You know, freedom of speech is often a justification for saying whatever you want, whenever you want, no matter who it hurts. True freedom is not the ability to say whatever you please, but the ability to speak with wisdom and with compassion. It's sharing appropriately, but not aggressively. As Paul Simon says, you don't have to lie to me. Just give me some tenderness. There is so much anguish on the table right now. How do we bring tenderness into this? This is where the Dharma shines, I think. It's the way we speak to each other, and this is where the practice is, and we practice at home, and we practice in our sangha, and I think we can take that same attitude into public discourse and into political discourse. Rumi famously said, "Before you speak, let your words pass through three gates. At the first gate, ask yourself, is it true? At the second gate, is it necessary? At the third gate, ask, is it kind?" I've also heard people addend that with, is it timely? And does it need to be said by me? And I think in the political frame especially, and online especially, does it need to be said by me? And it doesn't need to be said by me now. If all I'm doing is, if I'm in an echo chamber of anger, it doesn't need to be said. Rumi also said, out beyond the ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. I love that. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. And what this says to me is that our relationship is more important than what's right and what's wrong. And it's also an acknowledgement that we're going to mess up. We're going to stumble. We're human. And that's okay. That's okay. As Buddhist practitioners exercising free speech, and this goes back to that tricycle article, which I recommend you read, the John Peacock article. He says that as Buddhist practitioners exercising free speech, we're called on to speak out against injustice, to speak up for people who can't speak for themselves, and to use our voices to create positive change in the world. We're called to be courageous, to be bold, and to stand up for what we believe in, even in the face of adversity. But as RuPaul famously says, with great power comes great responsibility. We must always speak with mindfulness and with compassion, and remember the impact that our words have on other people. We're all on this journey of growth and transformation, and this is a real juicy place we can work. As far as that question of free speech or right speech, personally, I look at do no harm, and I err on the side of just not speaking. If it is going to come down to that, I shut up, or I try to. So, this right speech, right listening, wise conversation, these are lifelong practices. And it's a personal task. And we started talking about the Palestinian situation and these painful conversations. And as we do this work on social justice particularly, we have tools that help us have wholesome, loving conversations. We have them at home. We can bring them into the public sphere. And maybe this is the contribution that we can bring into the world, to bring some harmony and some healing into this discourse. It's certainly worth a try. That's it. Thank you. plenty of time for questions if you want questions to come. Question. It starts by paying attention, me to start paying attention to myself, pay attention to my body language as we're talking to people, and start to recognize what tension looks like. Because once I start being able to recognize it in myself, I can also recognize it in other people a little easier. I think most of it comes from a desire to want it. If you put that front in your mind, because what happens so often is that as we're talking, I'm formulating my response. You're not finished talking yet, and I'm already a step ahead of you. And when I'm doing that, I'm not paying attention to what's going on, arms, and all these other things. So if I can just stop and stay with what you're saying and pay attention, I think we're a step in that direction. Thank you. Right. Okay, so it's a great question, and welcome. I'm glad you're here.
Hey, Tom, could you repeat the question? We're not getting anything from the room here up on Zoom. We heard no question at all. Thanks.
Sure. It's his first time here, first time at a Buddhist gathering, and he was asking what the Dharma is. It's a great question. I think of it as big D, little d. Okay, big D Dharma is the teachings of the Buddha, Buddhist teachings. It's called Dharma. But Dharma is also life. Everything is Dharma. That's small d Dharma. So, yeah, that's. I think, back to your last answer, I think the other piece that you can work on there is that the reason, one of the reasons that we humans do what you're talking about is because we're afraid if I let you finish talking and then I respond, I might tell the truth. The unvarnished, unpolished, speaking. And so that's why as you're speaking, we're most of us in conversation, we're busy with the pronunciation stuff. What we find with folks and talking about that is that the reason we didn't answer is because I said, some folks said, well, sometimes they folks that sometimes it's polish the actual truth. Good point. And also, I think, in a related note, is I don't want to seem like an idiot. So I need to really prepare and get myself, but it does remove you from, like you said. Great. Yep. Thank you, Tom.
the issue of do we not tell the truth? You know, I mean, I grew up in a situation where, you know, I'd be punished. Yeah, you know, people in mind put it well. Said we don't always have to tell the truth. We have to be,
You have to what?
but we have to be able to.
You have to be able to tell the truth.
Yeah. Sometimes. Yeah. Being aware of it, that just. I've been a therapist. There's a person who felt his rights, he didn't have rights to speak, have to use it. His reason was something first life. Yeah. So, tell the truth.
Thank you. You know, I grew up with a very similar thing of you can't say this because this will be their response. And what happens over time is you get the idea that I'm responsible for other people's emotional states, you know, and I think this is where skillful means comes in, you know, because there is a skill to it. And what I struggle with is this idea of having a voice in social justice issues and putting it through the filter of kindness. You know, is it kind saying something that the powers that be are not going to like? I mean, you know, when you speak up, there are going to be people that do not like it, and it makes them uncomfortable. Is there a kindness there? You know, is the kindness to those who are suffering? I have more questions than answers.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your talk. And it brings up a lot for me with feeling what's my responsibility as you know, quasi-bodhisattva. Like, if we want to relieve the suffering of all beings, and like, am I doing enough? It's like, what kind of Buddhist actions should I or could I be taking to end more suffering? And for good or for bad, I'm someone who does not listen to the news. I sort of choose to be ignorant about all of it. I just stay immersed in Buddhist texts, 12-step recovery. I'm a teacher, so it's like, you know, I'm at the 5-year-old level most of the day. And I was thinking, like, you know, we talk about, like, well, we're sitting here in silence on the cushion, like, what's that? But I think I remind myself that it ripples out, you know, that when I hear what you tell me, it affects how I behave in the world when I leave here. I actually started teaching my kindergartners the 3 things to think about before you say something, and somebody will blurt something out that's not very kind. Is that kind? Necessary? I'm trying to get them. So maybe it's rippling out a little bit, but I feel a sort of a guilt and curious about like how many terrible things are happening in the world, and I'm not at City Hall, and I'm not at the White House doing anything. I'm not doing anything. Yeah, that just came up for me. I don't think anything to say about that. what's doing enough, and what's our responsibility, as a bodhisattva, and, using the Dharma wheel.
Right.
What's,
Yeah. That question of what should we be doing or what can we be doing, it's something that I struggle with. I don't really know. I think if I start from a place of do no harm, that's a good start. As far as being aware of what's going on in the world, what I find is necessary that if I am going to be involved in these conversations, that I get myself out of the heat. I can't be in the passion of it. And if I'm watching cable news or if I'm, online and I'm going down this rabbit hole of anger, I'm not of any use to anybody. So for me, it's best to get my news a little stale. I'll read, the headlines of yesterday's New York Times, but not the articles. So I'm aware of what's going on, but I'm not getting wrapped up in that heat. And then I think if I'm in a place of willingness, that I'm that the opportunity will arise, I think.
following on a bit what Stephen said, the precept around killing could also be extended to thoughts and ideas.
Great point. Great point. You can kill the spirit of a child with your words.
What I was thinking.
Big rock in the pond, rippling.
Wondering, should one always squelch anger and emotion when approaching the three gates, for instance, because there's stuff that is going on in the world now that people are angry about and want to stop being ignored, want their voices to stop being ignored. And so isn't there a certain level of truth in expressing anger and not softening it and or trying to take care of the other person instead of expressing what you're really feeling?
I think that's a great point. There's power in anger, and I think that power can fuel action, and it can fuel right action. But I wonder if it's possible to do that and at the same time step a little bit away from the heat. I know for me, when I'm in a very angry place, especially that first flush, I'm really not thinking straight, and I'm not my most effective. And my speech that comes out of that moment of anger is probably going to be about the lowest speech you're going to get out of me, at any given time. But yeah, and as you were talking, I was just thinking about acta.
That's what I was thinking of too.
Yeah, and that anger and the change that came about and where that anger came from. So I can't and won't categorically say that you have to avoid anger like the plague. There is a place for it. There is a place for it. But in a 12-step context, what I always ask myself is, can I do this in a sober way? Can I stay away from the intoxication of the anger? You know? And in my case, it's frequently the answer is no. And if the answer is no from me, then I need to step aside and let other people who are better suited to do that work. And I'll support them in any way I can. Thank you.
I am this is my second time moving, and the first one was 35 years ago.
Welcome back.
But speaking of the past, I was also at Berkeley in 1968 when the whole place exploded, and all I did was demonstrate. I mean, because they were trying to kill me and send me to Vietnam, and they did. When I got out, they drafted me, and I had to go through all that. And 2 years later, I came out, and that really upset people. I mean, my mother told me that it would kill my father if he found out. This is 1970. So for me, I've had to speak my truth the whole time. I said, well, I won't talk to him about it, but I'm not going to change my life for you. And she never got over it, and I never forgave her. So, that's where I am. But I see the kids today in the tent with my descendants. And they're the descendants of that speech that I was doing at Berkeley in 1968, 1970, sitting at the GLF table, sitting at like a little card table with nobody there. Just a day liberation fund, nobody had the courage to sit there. I was skirted it because I was just terrified. No, there were no homosexuals except for me and my boyfriend. I could tell on a couple of guys at the GLF table. So, to a degree, and I was angry. I was angry at all the things people were telling me about who I was, that I was effective because I'm gay, that I should go merrily off and fight for the United States and stuff like that. So, I've always had to make my own way. And hopefully I can make more peacefully now. So thank you for your talk.
Oh, thank you. That I can respect the people that are coming out and standing up for themselves. So that isn't really my concern. What interests me is the communication piece of it. How are we communicating that? And how is it landing? And what I see is two conversations doing this, and they're not engaging in a way that I think is helpful, because I can see both sides. I was sickened when I saw what Hamas did. Over 1,000 people killed and kidnapped, just horrified. And when I look at Gaza, I'm horrified. When I look at the Israeli government, I'm horrified. I look at what's happening on the West Bank with the settlers, I'm horrified. So what can we do, to try to elevate that discourse? I don't know that there's any communication that can do that, frankly, but it's worth striving for.